Anderson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Cass Allen over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What's up, Bruin Bible listeners? This is your host, Will Decker. Wanted to reach out and say thank you guys for all the listens, all the love. We see it on social media. We see it on YouTube. It has been sensational. And we want to encourage you guys, if you guys are enjoying the podcast and liking it, that you guys subscribe and like it, whether it's on YouTube on our UCLA LAFB channel or the Bruin Bible, to subscribe either through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, however you guys listen and react to it, because it's going to allow us to do much greater things in the future. We're creators. We want to be giving the best Bruins content to all of our UCLA listeners. And the only way we can do that is if we have a fan base that is locked in and helping us out. So we appreciate you guys. We love you guys. If you guys have been liking it, please help us out with a like and subscribe. What is up, Bruin Bible listeners? Will Decker, your host. I got Jamal Madney to my right, the madman. Let's just not even sugarcoat it, man. When it rains, it pours. It's been a very, very tough week for UCLA football and their fans. Dante Moore entering the transfer portal. You know, we were the people that came up with the Dante to LA slogan for UCLA. Deanton Lynn not only just leaving, but going to USC on top of it. You add in the Carson Ryan transfer, some of these other things. Madman, I mean, we've been texting all throughout this week. How are we feeling as we kind of get a little bit of space from a couple days removed from all the madness that occurred last week? Arguably the worst, week in UCLA football since the tragic death of Red Sanders, I would say, is probably near the top of that list. Is that a fair statement in your eyes?
Yeah, I mean, it's you went there quickly, Will. There was no ramp up. I mean, it was a tough week. There's no question about it. And I think this is a really important episode for us, Will, and a really important conversation for us to, try and level set, I think, where this program is right now, where it needs to go, and kind of level set expectations. And I think moving forward, I think we have to start kind of with the elephant in the room of, hey, look, we have Chip Kelly for another year after everything that sort of happened and, everything that was discussed. And I think it ultimately came down to three things. I think when you look at the totality of UCLA football, I think there's three issues right now. I think the first issue is organizational. I think you have a chancellor that's leaving in July after a decorated 17 years. I think you have an AD where there's murmurs and chatter that he may be going somewhere else, a la Ohio State. And so under that sort of realm, I don't know if any organization can kind of survive a new chancellor, a new AD, and a new football coach within a 6 or 7 month period. The second issue for UCLA football right now is financial. And when you look at this university ecosystem, when it comes to the football program, you're only talking about 2 or 3 or 4 people that have the ability to write 7-figure checks for this program. And when one of those 2 or 3 or 4 people, and most notably the biggest one of those 2 or 3 or 4 people, comes out and defends the head football coach, it is not going to happen for the other 1 or 2 or 3 of them to go against a Casey Wasserman, someone whose name is outside the football center, someone who's building towers above Westwood Village on the other side of Wilshire. And then third, Will, I think it's financial. Third is political. Is I think the other issue that UCLA football is struggling with. Let's not forget the whole impetus for moving to the Big Ten was the $52 million in debt that the athletic department was in. What was the primary driver of that debt? It was dead money to coaches. It was buyouts to coaches that were fired. That ultimately led UCLA to start thinking outside the box, start this whole Big Ten process. We know how contentious it was with the regents, with the president of Cal, with Gavin Newsom, this whole political battle that has resulted in a calamony payment that needs to be done on an annual basis. And then if you get to the other side of that and finally sort of see light at the end of the tunnel, and the very first thing you do is pay a buyout to a coach, I mean, how do you sort of justify that to the regions? And how do you build any sort of political equity from the perspective of the university? Because the regions have their hand in so many things at UCLA. And if you upset them in one issue, it's going to impact your ability to sort of get work done in another issue. So I think it's really important for the fans to understand, look, I think we recognize this is not a fit moving forward, but there are just some organizational, financial, and political realities that the UCLA football program is facing, and that is why Chip Kelly is back for one more year. And I think short of a remember the Titans type of season, I think we're in a position here where 2024 will be Chip Kelly's last season. But I think where that puts the football program in a difficult situation is that you're essentially tipping your hand that you have a lame duck coach. And if you've got a lame duck coach, it becomes very hard to attract talent. It becomes very hard to retain talent. And that talent is both on the field as well as from a coaching staff perspective. And that, I think, is the point of departure by which we should talk about Coach DeAnton Lynn and Dante Moore.
Yeah, well, if it's attracting talent and letting go talent, we already may have the lame duck, thing out there to the public, unfortunately. But I completely agree, man. It's tough. And what Martin said in his interview with Bolch last week, he said it was more of a stability thing. I think that's financial, and I think it's somewhat saving face going into the Big Ten with at least 80 to 90% of what the unit will look like next year, given there's no more transfers entering the portal. So, I get it to an extent. I think financial is probably the biggest reason as to why Chip is coming back. But yeah, it's disheartening to say the least, and just kind of this domino effect that happened this past week. I kind of want to start with Dante Moore because it was such a letdown, I think, for UCLA fans. We wish him well. We wish him nothing but the best wherever he heads to. But man, this was the guy. This was, tabbed last year. We thought this guy could be the savior for UCLA football moving forward. 5-star recruit. We got Dante to LA trending on Twitter, moving forward. And you look at those first 3 games, he was outstanding, with the out-of-conference schedule. And then the in-conference schedule started. You saw some of the struggles. And, it started with that Utah first pass pick 6 that he was able to go with into Utah. And then it just kind of progressively kept going, and his confidence was lost a little bit. And I thought it was very telling in, when he declared for the transfer portal. He said as much, I want to go to a place where I'm developed properly. I thought that was a very telling statement from that. Wish Dante nothing but the best, but give me your thoughts on Moore entering the transfer portal. I can't say it was a complete shock, but it still hurt nonetheless.
No question about it, Will. And I'll start with just echoing your sentiments about how high I think his ceiling is. I mean, he is a prodigy, in my opinion. I think the sky is the absolute limit, and I hope he finds a situation where he's comfortable and where his talents are maximized, because I think he is a superstar in the making. I think, having said that, I think it was a really difficult year for him. I felt like the game was moving too quickly. We've broken this down a number of times, the Utah game, Oregon State game, even the Cal game, a lot of the same types of mistakes, same types of interceptions, left to right reads. It was just hard for him to sort of grasp the speed of the game naturally. I mean, just a true freshman, 18 years old. I also think he still needed some time to grow into his body. And I think, another year of development kind of in the weight room physically, I think is going to do him absolute wonders. I think it was one of the reasons why Ethan Garbers was named the starter at the beginning of the season, Will. And I think one of the great what ifs of UCLA football in 2023, and you and I have talked about this, what if Ethan Garbers had a little bit of a better showing in the first half against Coastal Carolina? And what if Ethan Garbers is able to kind of solidify the starting quarterback position? Because remember, he barely had it for a half of football, and that's what led to kind of Chip bringing in Dante, and then the musical chairs began. I think, truth be told, Will, I think Dante probably should have redshirted this year, just given sort of the speed of the game, the physicality of the game. I think you see a very similar type of prospect, a guy like a Malachi Nelson across town. He redshirted, both 5-star kids, both built about the same way. Lincoln Riley talked about him not being kind of physically quite ready in 2023. So I think it's important for Dante to find a situation where he develops extremely well. And I think, again, Will, what's crushing is that he was the highest rated quarterback UCLA ever had, only kind of the third 5-star quarterback after Hundley and Rosen since Aikman. So there was just so many hopes here about him being able to kind of go back to Big Ten country where he's originally from with UCLA and essentially put UCLA football back on the map in the 21st century. So there were just such high hopes for this young man that it's crushing to see him go. But I hope, whether it's Michigan or whether it's Oregon or it's Michigan State or any of the schools that are linked to him right now, just hope he has an abundance of success. And I think, Will, the bigger picture here is we're getting into a world now with NIL and the transfer portal. We're getting into kind of year 3 where the bank accounts of these teams are starting to get bigger, and college football is starting to look like Major League Baseball, kind of an uncapped sport. It comes down to how many alumni are willing to donate and create collectives, and how big are those collectives going to be on an annual basis. And so UCLA has to really understand where it falls within that hierarchy. And I think moving forward, UCLA football is going to be a lot more like a small market baseball team. And so it's going to be the Minnesota Twins. It's going to be the Oakland A's. It's going to be teams like that now have to start thinking differently. They're not going to be able to get these 5-star kids just off of face value of, hey, come to UCLA, beautiful campus, beautiful program, beautiful university. Dollars and cents are going to need to start coming into consideration here. And if UCLA is short in one area, they are going to have to start thinking differently. And the one thing I do admire about Chip is that he does think differently. Now, he's not the long-term future, and I think we're all there at that point. But whoever the next coach is going to be is going to have to think a little bit differently about talent development, talent acquisition moving forward. It's kind of the movie Moneyball, right, Will? Is, if you're going to play like them in here, you're going to lose to them out there, if you remember the line by Brad Pitt. So UCLA football is, I think, hopefully this year is also going to be a bit of a sandbox of figuring out how do we actually do this? Because we either have to raise a lot more money to be competitive, to be a perennial conference championship contender, or if we don't raise a lot more money, we have to do something differently in terms of the way we recruit, the way we identify talent, the way we develop that talent. Something is going to have to change.
I completely agree. And I think with the transfer portal successes we've had in previous years, I think that was just the beginning of the wild, wild west. Everything was up in the open. There wasn't really a strategy for it, if you will, until this year. You have to let things play out and figure out the best way to approach it. We're moving into a new territory. I know Chip and some of the other coaching people out there were saying, hey, we got to get some money in. They filmed a video. It was pretty prominent on social media sites where they say, hey, please help us out, donate. We can get some of these new players coming in. Now that you got some of these other teams coming into the play and really utilizing that with some of the money that they have, it's going to be a lot harder to get some of these guys, man. So it's going to be a very interesting process to see it play out. And, the thing that's always kind of bothered me is UCLA is a massive alumni base, specifically here in Southern California. I'd love to see them pony up, and maybe it doesn't have to be one person, but it's almost like voting. Like if you do it, then another person will do it, and then it'll lead to a chain effect where everyone kind of come together and donate together and make some big profit for UCLA football. I get why they don't want to donate right now, because a lot of people are really upset with the, coaching, tree that is going on there right now. But that's the way to do it, guys. It's going to take something like that, whether it's you pledging $20 and then you telling your buddy to pledge $20, that creates a reaction, and it allows you guys to maybe be in the ballpark for some of these elite recruits, because you don't have to sell LA. You don't have to sell the Big Ten Conference. You don't have to sell UCLA, the university. All you got to do is get within that striking distance, and the combination of all of them, it's like maybe I'll take $10,000 to $20,000 less if it means I can go to UCLA, because that means I can set myself up for the future with an incredible degree, #1 public university in the world right now. So please get out there, donate. I know it sucks right now, and I know you guys may want to hold onto that money until Chip does, whether it's now or after Chip leaves. Donate. Let's try to get this thing rolling, because that's how we make the program competitive.
Will, I'll just double down on what you said, because it was so important what you just said, and it was such an exceptional point, because I think the biggest mistake that fans and alumni and boosters today can make right now is to take their money off the table, because I know folks are frustrated. I know they're unhappy. I know they want to see a change of a new product, and there's sort of a cause and effect relationship with the fans. Well, if I take my money off the table, then they're going to change coaches. It's actually the other way around. Okay, the more money you give, it allows the program to be able to change coaches, get recruits, upgrade every aspect of the program. So what you're doing is you're unintentionally, really setting this program back even further if you're taking money off the table, because money talks, as sad as that is to say. But that's just where we are in college football today, is just the money is talking. Well, think about all of the upset people on Twitter. Think about all of the chatter. Think about all of the hashtags that were trending on Twitter. I mean, Bulge talked about it. Plashke talked about it. Others talked about it, that this is probably the most upset and unified that the UCLA fan base has been on social media since they can remember, since the start of Twitter. And what did it do? It didn't do anything. It didn't actually move the needle, because at the end of the day, one person spoke, and that one person happened to be giving a huge check. And so that one voice outweighed the voice of so many others, rightfully or wrongfully. So you have to be able to put your dollars behind your voices, as sad as that is to say, but we have to give, because if you take money out of this program, it just creates a vicious cycle domino effect, where then more recruits don't come, and more of the top coaches don't come, and more of those upgrades don't come. And then guess what? It takes a longer period of time to then recover. So if you truly love this program, you truly love UCLA, be part of a collective, start a collective, think about any businesses that you may be a part of, your family may be a part of, that could sponsor players and endorse players. Now is the time to give, to get this program where we all want it to be. And it's not just the giving in the good times, it's the giving in the tough times. So I just wanted to double click on that, Will, because it was really an exceptional point.
No, I appreciate that, my man. And just to kind of transition to the next points, it came down to dollars and cents for our guy D'Anton Lynn, who's now headed to USC. And as painful as it is that he's going to the Trojans after he revitalized our defense, went from 89th in the country to 11th in 1 year in total defense. I mean, that is as impressive as it gets, in terms of turning things around. But what it came down to is I can't totally blame him for taking that opportunity, because he's literally doubling his salary, as rumor has it, going to LA and USC. So it's rough, man. It's rough to hear it, but that's how you get ahead of these curves. You have to donate. You have to put money forth to be able to sustain the success of the program and where it can head to. So D'Anton Lynn, we are crushed that he's leaving. Give me your just take on, how you've heard about the news, how you felt about it. I know we had a phone call about it for about 15 minutes, just kind of expressing, how disappointed we were, but we understood at the end of the day. And it's tough, man. It's a tough situation to kind of bite down on, because he's going to SC.
No, Will, I'll tell a story to our viewers just to sort of lighten things up a bit here. And obviously, things were very quiet. And one of the things, Will, that's so interesting to me, even in this entire process, is the number of people that think they're sort of experts and they're in the know, and nobody's in the know. Like, that's what this sort of process showed. There were so many people that were sort of close to both UCLA and USC who had so many theories about all of this stuff, none of which really involved D'Anton Lynn in any sort of a serious way, but all of whom kind of claimed to be insiders with sources and experts. And it just kind of goes to show you how tight some of these organizations really are. So it's really important for each individual fan to do their homework and look at different sources. And I just thought that was a humorous situation. But right around Friday at 5 p.m., I think, Will, it was right around kickoff of that Pac-12 championship game between Oregon and Washington, which probably feels like a year ago at this point, just given everything that's happened. We hear the story break with D'Anton Lynn. Obviously, first thing I do is just try and verify. I was stunned. I was shocked. I sort of, was talking to some folks, and I said, if SC is smart, they're really going to be aggressive with D'Anton Lynn just because of how great a coach he is. And then the very next thing that I do, Will, as we always do, is I messaged you. And then the great response, it was so quick. because you were so stunned that you typoed it, and the response was, "You're shutting me." Okay. And that was really our sort of point of departure with this, Will. And it's really sad, because I think UCLA was building something so special on the defensive side of the ball. And again, it was a 2-year, $2 million contract for DeAnton Lynn. USC came in at 3 years, $6 million. Okay, so it was a $1 million versus a $2 million. It was double. But again, this was one of those situations where I don't think this was a 8 or 9 year, 90, 100, $110 million type of Jimbo Fisher, Mel Tucker type of contract. This was a matter of $1 million, which is a lot of money, obviously. But in the landscape of college football, the inability of UCLA to maybe even go up $500K, meet him halfway. My understanding of the situation, Will, given some inside information, is that there was no counter from UCLA. So it was kind of like, we're at 1, they came in at 2. Even if you can come back at 1-4, 1-5, 1-5 versus 2, you're sort of in the ballpark. By all indications, he was really happy at UCLA. There was probably an angle there to say, hey, listen, if it doesn't work out with Chip next year, you can be the head coach. And so there's a lot of ways to sort of have kept him. And the fact that we lost him in the way that we did, again, it's disappointing and reinforces this notion that we've become kind of a small market football program, even though we're situated in Los Angeles. And so to think differently moving forward is really an imperative. But I think DeAnton Lynn was absolutely incredible. Still in his early 30s, Will. You talked about the turnaround with the defense, and in most particular, that front seven was absolutely dynamic. And I think the one solace that I take, and I think the one solace that I think Bruin fans should take, is that I don't think he's going to be at USC very long either, because I think he's destined for a head coaching job. I mean, if he puts together one more really great year the way he did this past year, I mean, he's not going to stay a coordinator for very long. He's destined to be a head coach. And so I wish perhaps he comes back as head coach of UCLA. If that carousel swings, he has a great year across town, ready for the head coaching job. Could he come back around? And so I think hopefully not all will be lost. But obviously now it is sort of back to the ground floor here, Will, on the defensive side of the ball. And I know you and I have talked about this. I think Ken Norton Jr. should be the guy, now as the defensive coordinator, in terms of stability, in terms of continuity, in terms of his recruiting prowess, in terms of his love for UCLA. I think one of the areas where UCLA can start thinking differently is you need to start having people that had tremendous memories and experiences at UCLA in these places. And so guys like Jerry Neuheisel, Deshaun Foster, Ken Norton Jr., these are the guys that are going to treat UCLA not as a stepping stone job, not as just a job on the road to something else, but as a destination, as a calling. And I think Ken Norton Jr. should have his number called as defensive coordinator of UCLA.
And you nailed it at an earlier point where you said we got to think about small ball. Like, that's kind of what we're looking at now. It felt so Moneyball-ish, where Billy Beane has that conversation where he's like, we got the players, we got everything we need. And then the Yankees come and grab him at the last second. They overpay him. That is exactly what happened with DeAnton Lynn. So, we had the best defensive coordinator we've had in well over a decade, probably the best defense we've had in 30 to 40 years. And right at the last second, the USC, the big money team, comes in and swoops and takes the team out of our hands. So it was a very tough situation to lose DeAnton Lynn like that. Wish him the best. Hopefully he can come back to UCLA and maybe carve his name into one of the great coaches we've ever had there as a head man. I think he definitely deserved the head coaching job. But you made another great point. Ken Norton Jr., that was my counterpoint for a lot of people that were heaping all of the praise onto DeAnton Lynn. This was the first time he was ever a defensive coordinator. I'm going to say it helps a lot to have arguably the best linebacking coach, in football. I mean that, pro and college. He's proved it at both levels. Ask Bobby Wagner how he's gotten developed in the NFL. Ask Khalil Mack, who made him Defensive Player of the Year in the NFL. And, we know at USC, man, we got our freaking guys out here, Brian Cushing, Ray Maluga, some of the big names within the sport. So he's done it as well as anybody. And I'd be interested to see how much, DeAnton leaned on our guy, Ken Norton Jr. in one of those situations. So a lot to talk about there. Carson Ryan, man, I think we got to just brush on this point before we head into, Latu winning Defensive Player of the Year and the bowl game. There are some positives in this podcast, we promise. Carson Ryan was very disappointed in this loss, man. A guy that averaged about 16 yards a catch, didn't get a lot of catches. And I think a lot of people in my comments were like, why are you so, sad over a guy that essentially only had 15 catches this year? It's because every time he touched the ball, he made a big play happen. I feel very similar to Carson Ryan in terms of how I felt about Logan Loya, where every time this guy touched the football, you could see something happen with the offense. It was very similar to what Keegan Jones went through this year. When he touched the ball, something good happened. I remember that 45-yard catch he made on 4th down against Utah to keep us in the game. I remember the first 2 weeks, this guy had the first touchdown of the season in the red zone. This was a guy that I think was probably going to be our top returning pass catcher, in my opinion, for next year, with the J. Mikes and the Fords and the Loyas all gone off the field. So, yes, I was very excited about Carson Ryan. What did you take into account with him going into the transfer portal, Madman?
Yeah, Will, I was just as equally disappointed as you were, because I think you and I both saw the potential. And I think oftentimes we look at guys from a productivity standpoint and say, man, okay, it's a transfer. It's okay. That person didn't do that much. Well, you know who else statistically actually didn't do that much this year, but we feel very, very differently about is Keegan Jones, right?
Yeah.
And with Keegan Jones being in the transfer portal. And I put Carson Ryan in a very similar category as Keegan. And the reason for that, Will, is I think he was our most athletic tight end. And when you look at kind of Habermel and Matavao and others, when you see Carson Ryan, I mean, the variety of catches he was able to make, balls down the sideline, balls deep against Utah, his ability to go across the middle, his ability to block. I mean, his versatility was absolutely top-notch, Will. And so to be able to lose him is again, very, very crushing. But again, it makes sense because I think he's in a situation where I think he would have really thrived under a Dante Moore as a quarterback, a guy who could make maybe bigger throws, more complex throws once he sort of grew into his body and understood the speed of the game. I love Ethan Garbers. I think he's going to have a really terrific 2024 season and really sort of solidify that job. But Garbers' game is much more simplified. I mean, it's play action. It's finding tight ends down the middle. He likes kind of his big, reliable targets where there's a lot of room and a lot of space. And Carson Ryan can be that, but Carson Ryan is so much more than that. And I think he sort of understood that and realized I need to be able to move on to really maximize all of my gifts and really showcase my ability at the next level. Another kid that I'm absolutely heartbroken is gone, Will, and another one who I'm going to be cheering from afar wherever he goes because he's an absolute stud. And so this is one that's really going to hurt. Him and Keegan in particular are two that are really going to hurt next year that we're going to feel because moving forward, Will, in 24, obviously Loya is a senior. We don't know what J. Mike is going to do. I personally think J. Mike will go pro just given, everything that he's been able to show in practice with NFL insiders, with scouts and others. But there is a possibility he may come back. Who knows? But if J. Mike goes, you're really missing some dynamic weapons now, especially with Keegan Jones and Carson Ryan gone. It makes this offense very conventional and very much, hey, we got to stay in front of the sticks. The moment we get behind the chains, going to be very hard to be able to get first downs and extend. It's going to be very hard for players to break the natural script of a play and do more. And Carson Ryan was one of those guys who could do more. So another tough pill to swallow here. Will, we've been taking our medicine. I feel like, my grandmother or my grandfather, I got my pills right next to me with my big glass of water. And it just every night I'm taking my medicine. And you and I, it's just one pill after another here, it seems, tonight.
Daily dose, man. It's been a lot. We got those, it's laid out with the days on the pill box.
With the days.
Like
you got
Monday,
the tray,
Tuesday.
and then you got the Monday,
Tuesday, last
Wednesday.
week was those pain
Absolutely.
pills, man.
You got your pink pill and your purple pill and your orange pill. Yeah, no, absolutely.
We were like a freaking pharmacy last week with the pills we were swallowing, man. It was a long, long week for UCLA football. But there are some positive news, man. Latu, Defensive Player of the Year. And I've said it many of times. I said it like I said with Charbonnet last year. Don't take this guy for granted because this guy doesn't grow on trees, man. One of the all-time UCLA greats was able to achieve his status of, being Pac-12 Player of the Year. That was one of his preseason goals. We scoffed the notion that this guy could get to 15 sacks. He still sits at 13 with a game left, depending on if he wants to play in the bowl game or not. He's likely going to win the best defensive lineman within college football this year. Is there a play or some moments that stood out to you for Latu with him probably sitting out the bowl game in all likelihood. And I totally understand with him heading to the next level and likely being a top 10 pick.
Will, I got to go back to, there were so many moments, but the things when you say 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, what are you going to remember from Latu? I'm going to remember the 2 Victory Bell games, Will. And I'm going to remember last year, when it was that shootout, the epic game, nobody could stop anybody. UCLA 1 possession behind that whole game, desperately needing a stop. And on that 3rd down, SC on the UCLA side of the field, Latu comes in there and actually sacks Caleb Williams. The place goes bananas, and all 90,000 thought UCLA was going to win the game at that point. And he was the one guy that was able to sort of corral Caleb Williams in that game. I will always remember that. And then fast forward to this year in the Coliseum, SC totally on their heels, UCLA really establishing dominance, SC kind of driving in that red zone, Will, to try and get back in the game, and then Latu going back-to-back sacks on Caleb. The first one where he just sort of sheds a single blocker. Second one, he sheds the double team and sort of almost throws the double team into Caleb and takes care of business as well. So to me, some epic moments, and I'll always remember his incredible story, the inspirational player and person that he is. I hope he is going to be an absolute superstar in the NFL. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. And Will, I think he was the best player in college football in Los Angeles in 2023. No question about it.
No questions asked, man. He was an absolute baller this year. And, I remember those plays that you named as well. The Victory Bell games were so important because you become a legend when you ball in the rivalry games. And, I mean, last year, 2022 game, he gets the sack. It was almost like the defenses couldn't stop one another. He gets the sack for USC to punt the football, giving UCLA a chance. It felt like we were going to win that game. Ultimately, we came up a little bit short. But the willpower to get in there when we needed him the most, it was such an awesome play. Love Latu for that. 2 plays that stand out to me this year. Who knew he had mitts, man? 2 interceptions on the football field. I mean, it was
absolutely.
He could do it all out there. I'm like, can this guy play safety too? Can he get back and guard some of these wide receivers? 2 picks for Latu, and just the confidence. The 3 sacks against Colorado was just an all-time performance this year. 3 sacks against Coastal Carolina, where we came into the season going like, we love this dude. 15 sacks seems a little too far out. You should, just focus on getting double digits. He got 3 sacks the first game. We're texting each other going, we may have to rewrite this entire thing, given the fact that he's probably going to get there before conference play starts.
Absolutely. We were sort of joking about, 15 sacks. I love Latu, but that seems a little bit high. We walk out of the Coastal game saying, okay, he's on pace for 36. So maybe 15 was a little conservative.
It was, man. And just such a fun player. Love him. Duke Clemens and Darius Muwaso made second team. Just want to say Alex Johnson got completely snubbed, man. Completely snubbed. I mean, this guy, one of the best corners I can remember at UCLA, period, for what he was able to do. He was one of our guys coming out of camp. We really liked him. Really stood out among all the defensive backs. 3 interceptions. Every time his number was called, it seemed like he made a play. PFF had him graded as one of the top corners within the Pac-12. Just getting an honorable mention that just doesn't sit right with me. So I would like to see them kind of progress there further.
I completely agree on that one, Will. And I think if any NFL GM or scout or someone in the personnel room of any of these NFL offices is listening, if you're smart, you're going to be giving Alex Johnson a serious look at the next level, whether he gets drafted or not. If he's undrafted, that is an absolute diamond in the rough that should be invited to your camp and an opportunity to make the team, because I see Alex Johnson as a guy, as an undrafted free agent, is going to make an NFL roster next year and is going to make someone very happy and make someone look very, very smart that they did it.
Yeah, and you know what? I think he's going to be a phenomenal corner in the NFL too. But kind of the comparison I have for him is Matthew Slater, the former UCLA guy that went on to the Patriots as a special teamer. Like, smart player, handles his business, does everything the right way. And that's going to lead him to getting a roster spot. The other 2 guys that got snubbed, in my opinion, were the Murphy twins. Maybe they didn't have the stats to back it up because Latu was sacking everything back there. But in terms of impact, those guys are Pac-12 all first or second team at the very least. Those guys were monsters off the edge, and they're going to be NFL players on Sunday as well. Do you think that was fair of them to leave off the Murphy twins? Because I was in shock at that as well.
No, I was stunned by that, Will, to be very honest with you. And I think it just goes to show that not everybody watches all the games and doesn't understand impact. And you always look at the stats there. These are two guys that are NFL written all over it. And who knows, in kind of looking at the bright side of things, maybe the fact that they were left off, this selection in terms of all Pac-12 teams, maybe that gives them a little bit of pause that they want to come back one more year and really kind of definitize their draft stock going into next year the way Latu did. Look, last year, Will, we were thinking Latu was definitely going to kind of get drafted at the end of next year. Oh, maybe third round, fourth round, mid round. I mean, he's gone from third, fourth round to top 10, no question about it. I think the Murphy twins have an opportunity to potentially make a similar jump going into the 24 season. So there may be some light at the end of this tunnel as a result of this snubbing.
Yeah, and hopefully it, pans out the best for these guys. I think they're going to have bright futures, whatever they do at the next level or in life in general. So those guys are coming. We're going to have Wayne Cook on this week to talk about Boise State. But give me just kind of your synopsis of the bowl game. UCLA's playing in LA. I don't know if it's going to be as a typical UCLA crowd, if you will, because I think a lot of people are kind of boycotting the current situation. But I know I'm going to be there. I know you're going to be there. Any excitement going into SoFi, the coolest stadium, and maybe all of sports for UCLA this next week?
Well, I think it's always going to be very exciting when you can play in your home city. And I think Boise State has been a brand that's so recognizable in the sport the last 15 or 20 years. I think they've had their own challenges. They just hired their interim coach who won the Mountain West Championship against UNLV. And they're going through some similar challenges as well. Their starting quarterback, Green, is in the transfer portal. So they don't really know who they're starting. They're going through some transition as well. And those Mountain West teams always have such a chip on their shoulder whenever they get an opportunity to play a Pac-12 team in a bowl game, particularly on the West Coast, because the Mountain West feels a little bit left out, in terms of kind of the have-nots relative to the Pac-12. So you're going to get a hungry, motivated Boise State team with a lot to prove. They want to show probably a lot of guys that had an opportunity to play in, wanted to play in SoCal, wanted to play for UCLA. Maybe it didn't work out. They've got a lot of edge to them. So they're going to be playing a very young and hungry Boise State team. And I think this is a game where the bowl game oftentimes is such a momentum creator for the following season, in terms of a player and his or her performance. I go back to TJ Harden last year. Obviously, he broke out in that Cal game, but then followed it up emphatically in the Sun Bowl against Pitt, really kind of set the tone of expectations for him going into this season. Could we have a similar story with somebody at wide receiver? Maybe J. Mike has a big game, decides he wants to come back. Does it sort of have a snowball effect? And then does it just give Ethan Garbers kind of solidifying his confidence going into 2024 as being the de facto signal caller? And then also on the defensive side, somebody like an Oladipo, who now we know Latu's gone. We know Muasau's gone. We don't know what's going to happen with the Murphy twins. Oladipo is going to be one of the big anchors of this defense next year in this front seven. This is an opportunity for him to step up and really stake claim to that leadership role and set himself up next year as a leader. Same thing with the Kamari Ramsey. This is his opportunity to kind of galvanize that secondary, be the de facto leader going into next year. So there's a lot of opportunities in terms of leadership transition on the player side in these bowl games. And we all know bowl practices and bowl prep is so vital and instrumental to player development going into next year. So there's a lot to still be very excited about. It's always great to get a win. UCLA has not won a bowl game since 2014, Will. So it's been almost 10 years. So this is a significant moment here. If they can get this thing done, get a trophy into the J.D. Morgan Center and sort of use that as the start of some momentum going into 2024. So I know we'll get into it a lot more later in the week, but I'm excited, as we all should be.
Yeah, I'm looking for Ethan Garbers to really kind of go to bat in this game and really take some chances downfield and give, UCLA fans some faith that next year he's going to be on pace to do some great things. Name to watch. There's a lot of guys entering the transfer portal. What happened to our guy Braden Pagan, man? I'm ready to see Pagan out there. 6'4" wide receiver, 195 pounds. If you watched him in spring ball, he looked electric at times. one-handed grabs, going and mossing defenders in the red zone. Braden Pagan, we got to see it. I'm excited. Hopefully we can get him out there. Madman, great to see you as always, my man. Let's get our Bruins, hopefully, another win coming up soon. We got Wayne coming up here this week. Guys, thank you for listening to the Bruin Bible. We'll be out, and we'll be back very, very soon. Talk to you later.